Chapter 1. The wait of 4 days, Derick Sloan stood in the middle of his two-bedroom apartment, staring at the couch like it was a battlefield. The cushions were uneven, the throw blanket was balled up in the corner, and the armrest bore the faint imprint of his elbow from countless nights spent there. He sighed, tugging the blanket free and shaking it out. It smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something else, loneliness, maybe. He wasn't sure if that had a scent, but if it did, it was probably this. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. In a few hours, it would be filled with laughter, arguments over cartoons, and the sound of his son's sneakers thudding against the floor as if the kid were training for a marathon. For now, though, it was just him and the hum of the refrigerator. Derick checked the clock. 3 hours until pickup. He had already vacuumed twice, scrubbed the bathroom, and rearranged the snacks in the pantry like a grocery store display. Chips on the left, juice boxes in the middle, cookies on the right. He wanted everything perfect. For days a month, that was all he got. For days to remind his kids that they mattered more than anything in the world. He opened the fridge and frowned. Milk, eggs, leftover Chinese takeout, and a suspicious jar of pickles. He closed it again and grabbed his keys. Grocery run number 2. Because what if they wanted strawberry yogurt and he only had vanilla? What if his daughter asked for blueberries and he had none? He wasn't taking chances. The supermarket was crowded, a blur of carts and chatter. Derick moved through the aisles with purpose, tossing fruit, cereal, and a frozen pizza into his cart. He paused at the toy section, staring at a rack of plush animals. His daughter loved unicorns. His son was into dinosaurs. He picked one of each, then hesitated. Was this spoiling them? No, it was making up for lost time. There was no manual for part-time fatherhood, but if there had been, Derick was pretty sure it wouldn't say, "Don't buy the unicorn." By the time he returned home, his apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and desperation. He set the toys on the bed, his bed which his daughter would claim tonight, and fluffed the pillows. His son would take the smaller room, the one with the mismatched curtains and the poster of a basketball player Derick had hung to make it feel less empty. Derick would sleep on the couch, as always. He didn't mind. Comfort was a luxury. Time with his kids was priceless. At 5 o'clock sharp, Derick pulled up in front of the house he used to live in. The house that still felt like his in some cruel, lingering way. The lawn was freshly mowed, the porch light glowing softly. He gripped the steering wheel, forcing a smile as the front door opened. "Hey," said Marissa, his ex-wife, stepping out with their kids trailing behind her. She looked the same, polished, composed, like divorce had been a minor inconvenience rather than a tectonic shift. "Hey," Derick replied, climbing out of the car. His heart lifted at the sight of his children. Emma, 9 years old and already carrying herself like a teenager, wore a pink hoodie and clutched a stuffed rabbit. Liam, 7, had a baseball cap turned backward and a grin that could melt steel. "Daddy." Liam barreled into him, arms wrapping around his waist. Derick laughed, hugging him tight. "Hey champ, missed you." Emma approached more slowly, but her smile was warm. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent of her shampoo like it was oxygen. "Ready for the weekend?" She nodded. "Did you get the yogurt?" Derick grinned. "Strawberry and vanilla. And blueberries." Her eyes lit up. "Awesome." Marissa cleared her throat. "They've got homework. Don't let them forget." "I won't," Derick said. Their exchanges were always like this, civil, clipped, like two diplomats negotiating a ceasefire. He didn't hate her. He didn't even blame her, not entirely. But standing here, watching her wave goodbye from the porch of the house he still paid for, felt like swallowing glass. The drive back was filled with chatter. Liam talked about a science project involving volcanoes. Emma complained about a girl in her class who copied her entire essay. Derick listened, laughed, asked questions. He wanted to memorize every word, every inflection, like a man hoarding sunlight before winter. When they reached the apartment, Liam dashed inside like he owned the place. Emma followed, slower, scanning the room with a critical eye. "You cleaned," she said. "Of course I did," Derick replied, carrying their overnight bags. "Only the best for my favorite people." Liam popped his head out of the bedroom. "Dad, you got the basketball poster." Derick grinned. "Thought you'd like it." Emma wandered into the kitchen, opening the fridge. "Yogurt," she announced, satisfied. "And blueberries." "See," Derick said, spreading his arms. "I deliver." She smiled, and for a moment, Derick felt like maybe he wasn't failing at this. Dinner was pizza because some traditions were sacred, and then came the chaos of bedtime. Emma claimed his bed without hesitation, arranging her stuffed animals like royalty. Liam sprawled across the smaller bed, clutching his tablet. "Lights out in 10, Derick said, standing in the doorway. 10 minutes, Liam groaned. "That's like forever." "Forever is good for you," Derick said. "Makes you grow taller." Emma smirked. "That's not how it works." "Pretty sure it is," Derick replied, deadpan. "I read it on the internet." She rolled her eyes but laughed, and Derick felt that laugh settle somewhere deep, like a bomb. Later, when the apartment was quiet again, Derick lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. His back ached, his neck protested, but he didn't care. The kids were here. For 2 days, he wasn't optional. He was dead. He was needed. He thought about the silence that would come Sunday night, the hollow ache of dropping them off and driving back alone. He hated that part. Hated how the world felt dimmer without their voices. But he pushed the thought away. Tonight was his. Tomorrow was his. He would make it count. Derick closed his eyes, listening to the faint sound of Emma humming in the next room, and smiled. For days a month. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And for now, something was everything. Chapter 2. The accidental encounter. Sunday nights were the worst. Derick stood in the driveway of Marissa's house, watching Emma and Liam disappear through the front door like smoke slipping through his fingers. He waved, forcing a smile that felt like a mask. Marissa gave a polite nod before closing the door, and just like that, the weekend was over. The drive back was quiet. Too quiet. He turned on the radio, but every song sounded like a breakup anthem. So he shut it off and let the silence press against him. His apartment would be waiting, clean, organized, and empty. He hated that word. Empty. It sounded like a verdict. Halfway home, Derick decided he couldn't face the apartment yet. He needed something, anything, to fill the void. Comfort food, maybe. Ice cream didn't judge. Ice cream didn't ask why you only saw your kids 4 days a month. Ice cream just existed, sweet and cold and uncomplicated. He pulled into the nearest grocery store, grabbed a cart, and headed straight for the frozen aisle. Mint chocolate chip. Emma's favorite. He hesitated, then tossed it in anyway. Maybe he'd save it for next weekend. Or maybe he'd eat it tonight and pretend she was there. He rounded the corner toward the dairy section, and that's when it happened. A woman barreled into him, her cart slamming into his with the force of a minor car accident. A gallon of milk teetered on the edge before plummeting to the floor, exploding like a dairy grenade. "Oh my God!" she gasped, hands flying to her mouth. "I am so sorry." Derick blinked at the milk pooling around his shoes. "Well," he said deadpan, "guess we don't need to worry about calcium deficiency." She laughed, a quick, bright sound that made him look up. She was striking, not in the glossy magazine way, but in the real, vibrant way that made you notice her even if you didn't want to. Her hair was a tumble of chestnut waves, her cheeks flushed from embarrassment, and her eyes, hazel, wide, and alive, were locked on his. "I swear I'm usually better at steering," she said, crouching to grab the ruined carton. "This is not my finest moment." Derick crouched too, their hands brushing as they reached for the soggy cardboard. He felt a jolt, small, but enough to make him pause. "No harm done," he said, offering a smile. "Well, except to the milk." She grinned, and something about it tugged at him. "Let me buy you another one." "It's fine," Derick said quickly. "Really?" She tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle. "You're sure? Because I feel like I owe you at least a replacement and maybe a coffee for emotional damages." Derick chuckled despite himself. "Emotional damages? Milk trauma is real," she said solemnly, then broke into another grin. "I'm Lila, by the way." "Derick," he replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was warm, firm, and lingered just a second longer than necessary. "Well, Derick," Lila said, standing and brushing off her jeans. "If you ever need a lawyer for dairy-related accidents, I'm your girl." He laughed again, really laughed, the kind that felt rusty but good. "I'll keep that in mind." They exchanged a few more words, light, easy, like skipping stones across water, before parting ways. Derick walked to the checkout with his mint chocolate chip and a strange feeling in his chest. He didn't know what to call it. Hope? No, that was too big, too dangerous. Maybe curiosity. That felt safer. Back in his apartment, Derick tossed the ice cream in the freezer and sank onto the couch. He stared at his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. He could look her up. Maybe. But he didn't even have her last name. And what would he do if he did? He wasn't ready for whatever that was. He had kids. He had baggage. He had a life that felt like a jigsaw puzzle missing half the pieces. Still, he couldn't shake the sound of her laugh. Bright, unapologetic, like someone who didn't carry the weight of 4 days a month. Derick closed his eyes and told himself it was nothing. Just a random encounter. A funny story to file away. Tomorrow, he'd go back to work, drown himself in spreadsheets, and count the days until Emma and Liam came back. But deep down, he knew the truth. It didn't feel like nothing. Chapter 3. The persistent stranger. Derick wasn't expecting to see her again. It had been 2 weeks since the milk incident, and life had settled back into its predictable rhythm. Work, laundry, counting down the days until Emma and Liam's next visit. He'd almost convinced himself that Lila was just a funny blip in the grocery store timeline, a momentary spark in an otherwise gray stretch of days. Then he went jogging. It was Saturday morning, the kind of morning that smelled like fresh grass and sounded like distant lawnmowers. Derick wasn't much of a runner, but he liked the park. It was quiet, green, and didn't remind him of spreadsheets. He was halfway through his second lap when someone shouted behind him. "Hey, milk guy!" Derick slowed, blinking in confusion. "Milk guy?" He turned, and there she was. Lila. Same chestnut waves. Same bright eyes. Same grin that looked like it had been designed to short-circuit his brain. "You," he said, breathless from running and maybe from surprise. "You're, Lila," she supplied, jogging up to him. She wore running shoes and a neon tank top that declared namaste in bed. "And you're Derick, right?" "Right," he said, still catching his breath. "Milk guy." She shrugged, smiling. "It was either that or dairy disaster. You pick." Derick laughed, shaking his head. "I'll stick with milk guy." "Good choice," she said, falling into step beside him. "So, do you always run like you're being chased by tax collectors? Or is today special?" He smirked. "This is my normal pace." "Wow," she said, mock-impressed. "You must be training for the Olympics." "Dad, Olympics," he said without thinking. "Gold medal in assembling bunk beds and finding lost socks." She laughed. A real laugh, loud and unfiltered. People turned to look, but she didn't care. Derick liked that about her. He liked it more than he should. "So," she said, glancing at him. "Do you run here often?" "Sometimes," he said. "It's peaceful." "Peaceful is good," she agreed. "I come here when I need to clear my head, or when I want to accidentally run into people I've traumatized in grocery stores." Derick grinned. Mission accomplished. They jogged in companionable silence for a while, the kind that felt easy, not awkward. Derick wasn't sure what to make of this, of her. She was funny, quick, and had this energy that made the air feel lighter. He hadn't felt that in a long time. When they reached the fountain, Lila slowed to a stop. "Okay, I'm done pretending I like cardio," she said, bending to tie her shoe. "Coffee?" Derick blinked. "Now?" "Why not?" she said, straightening. "There's a cafe across the street. Unless you have a strict post-run schedule involving protein shakes and existential dread." He hesitated. He had plans. Plans involving cleaning the apartment before the kids arrived. But those plans suddenly felt less urgent. "Coffee sounds good," he said. The cafe was small and cozy, with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. Lila ordered a caramel latte with extra whipped cream. Derick went for black coffee because he didn't trust himself to pronounce anything fancier without sounding like an imposter. They found a table by the window. Sunlight spilled across the worn wood, and for a moment, Derick felt like he'd stepped into someone else's life. A life where coffee dates were normal and laughter didn't feel like a borrowed thing. "So," Lila said, stirring her latte. "Tell me about yourself, milk guy." Derick smiled faintly. "Not much to tell. Everyone says that," she said, pointing her spoon at him. "And then they reveal they once wrestled a bear or won a karaoke contest in Tokyo." "No bears," Derick said. "No Tokyo. Just work. And kids." Her eyes lit up. "Kids, too," he said. "Emma's 9. Liam's 7. "That's awesome," she said, and he could tell she meant it. No awkward pause, no polite nod. Just genuine interest. "Do they live with you?" "Part-time," he said, trying to keep his tone even. 2 weekends a month." Lila's expression softened. "That must be hard." Derick shrugged, staring into his coffee. "It is, but I make it work." "I bet you do," she said quietly, and something in her voice made him look up. She wasn't pitying him. She was admiring him. That was new. He cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. "What about you?" "No kids," she said. "Just me and a very judgmental cat named Sir Pounce." Derick chuckled. "Sounds intense." "Oh, he is," she said solemnly. "He once stared at me for 20 minutes because I bought the wrong brand of kibble." They talked for an hour about cats, coffee, bad movies, and why pineapple on pizza was a crime against humanity. Derick found himself laughing more than he had in months. Felt good. Dangerous, but good. When they finally stood to leave, Lila handed him a napkin with her number scrawled across it in looping handwriting. "In case you need legal counsel for future dairy incidents," she said, winking. Derick stared at the napkin like it was a live grenade. "Thanks," he said, slipping it into his pocket. As he walked back to his car, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Chapter 4. The reluctant text. The napkin sat on Derick's kitchen counter like a dare. He'd placed it there after the coffee with Lila, smoothing it out as if that would make the decision easier. Didn't. The number stared back at him in looping handwriting, cheerful and unapologetic. He stared at it like it might bite. Text her? Don't text her? He wasn't ready for this. He had kids. He had baggage. He had a life that felt like a house built on sand. What did he have to offer someone like Lila? A couch bed and a schedule dictated by custody agreements? Romantic. Derick rubbed his face and groaned. He was overthinking this. It was just a text. People sent texts all the time. Entire relationships were built on emojis and gifs now. He could handle one message. He picked up his phone, opened the messaging app, and typed, "Hey, it's Derick. Milk guy." He stared at the words. Too short? Too weird? Should he add a smiley face? No, that felt desperate. He deleted the smiley, then added it back, then deleted it again. His thumb hovered like it was negotiating a peace treaty. Finally, he hit send before he could chicken out. The phone buzzed almost immediately. Lila, well, Milk Guy lives. Lila, I was starting to think you joined the witness protection program. Derick laughed out loud, the sound startling in his quiet apartment. He typed back, Derick, just busy. You know, Dad Olympics training. Lila, gold medal yet? Derick, working on it. Lost points for failing to assemble a Lego castle without swearing. Lila, harsh judges. The conversation flowed easily, like water finding its way downhill. They joked about milk trauma, debated whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It didn't, according to both, and shared their mutual hatred of reality TV. Derick felt something loosen inside him, a knot he hadn't realized was there. Then Lila sent the message that made his stomach flip. Lila, coffee was fun. Want to do it again? Maybe dinner this time? Dinner. That was bigger than coffee. Coffee was casual. Dinner was intentional. Dinner meant sitting across from someone and letting them see you, not just the surface but the cracks underneath. Derick stared at the screen, heart thudding. He wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to. But the voice in his head, the one that sounded suspiciously like every divorce lawyer he'd ever met, whispered, You're not ready. You'll screw this up. You'll hurt her. Or she'll hurt you. He typed, Derick, I'd like that, and hit send before fear could win. Saturday night found Derick standing in front of his closet, which looked like it had been curated by someone who thought fashion peaked in 2012. Button-down shirts in muted colors. Jeans that were comfortable in the way that screamed dad mode activated. He picked a navy shirt that didn't have a stain and hoped for the best. The restaurant Lila chose was small and warm, with string lights draped across the ceiling and the faint scent of garlic in the air. Derick arrived early, because of course he did, and spent 5 minutes pretending to read the menu while his nerves staged a coup. Then she walked in. Lila wore a green dress that made her eyes look like summer. Her hair was loose, her smile easy, and Derick felt something in his chest shift, like tectonic plates rearranging. Milk Guy, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. You clean up nice. Derick chuckled. Thanks. You look wow. Wow works, she said, grinning. So, what's good here? He had no idea. He'd been staring at the menu for 10 minutes and couldn't remember a single item. Pasta. Bold choice, she teased. Living dangerously, they ordered, and the conversation picked up where their texts left off. Light, funny, threaded with something deeper. Lila told him about her job as a freelance graphic designer, her love of hiking, and her cat's ongoing campaign to overthrow her as head of the household. Derick told her about Emma and Liam, about Lego disasters and bedtime negotiations that felt like hostage situations. You really love them, Lila said softly, and it wasn't a question. More than anything, Derick said, his voice rougher than he intended. She smiled, and for a moment, the noise of the restaurant faded. It was just them, two people sitting across from each other trying to figure out if maybe, just maybe, life had room for something new. After dinner, they walked to the parking lot under a sky scattered with stars. Lila stopped by her car, turning to him with that grin that made his pulse trip. So, she said, did I pass the milk trauma recovery test? Derick laughed. With honors. Good, she said, because I'd hate to think you were still suffering. He hesitated, then said, I'm glad we did this. Me too, she said, and for a second he thought she might kiss him, but she just smiled, slid into her car, and drove away, leaving him standing there with his heart doing cartwheels. Back home, Derick lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. He felt lighter, scared, but lighter. He didn't know where this was going. He didn't even know if he should want it to go anywhere. But for the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a locked door. It looked like a possibility. Chapter 5. Coffee and complications. Derick had been nervous before, but this was a whole new level. Dinner had been safe, neutral territory, low stakes. Tonight was different. Tonight was their first real date. Lila had suggested a cozy cafe downtown, the kind of place with Edison bulbs and chalkboard menus that made you feel like you should be wearing a scarf and quoting poetry. Derick owned neither a scarf nor any poetry, but he showed up anyway, determined not to embarrass himself. He arrived 10 minutes early, because punctuality was his love language, and claimed a corner table. He tried to look casual, scrolling through his phone, but his heart was doing gymnastics. He hadn't dated in years. He wasn't sure he remembered how. Was there a manual for this? Chapter 1. How not to sound like a dad trying too hard. The door chimed, and there she was. Lila breezed in wearing a denim jacket over a floral dress, her hair pulled into a loose braid that looked effortless in the way that probably took 20 minutes. She spotted him and smiled, a smile that hit him like sunlight after a long winter. Milk Guy, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. You're early. Habit, Derick said, grinning. I like to scope out the best table. And you picked the one next to the plant that looks like it's plotting world domination, she teased, nodding at the spiky fern beside them. Derick chuckled. I figured it would keep us safe. They ordered her usual caramel latte, his black coffee, and settled in. Conversation flowed easily, like it always did with her. They talked about music, bad movies, and why people still say, bless you, after sneezes like it's a magical spell. Derick found himself laughing more than he had in months, the sound rusty but real. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down and froze. It was a text from Emma. Emma. Dad. Liam put a sock in the fish tank. Emma. The fish looks mad. Derick stifled a laugh and typed back quickly. Derick. Take the sock out. Emma. He says it's the fish's blanket. Derick. Tell him fish don't need blankets. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, but Lila had noticed. Everything okay? She asked, sipping her latte. Yeah, Derick said, smiling sheepishly. Just dad stuff. Her eyes softened. You can answer if you need to. It's fine, he said. They're with their mom. Just creative problem solving. Sock in the fish tank? She guessed, and when his eyes widened, she grinned. You have that look. Derick laughed. Guilty. I like that you're a dad, Lila said, her tone light but sincere. It's kind of amazing. Derick blinked. Amazing. Yeah, she said, stirring her drink. You care. You show up. That's rare. He didn't know what to say to that. Compliments about his parenting hit differently, like someone had reached inside and touched the part of him that mattered most. He cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. Thanks, he said quietly. The rest of the date was easy, warm, threaded with laughter, until Derick decided to be bold. Want to grab dinner next time? He asked as they walked to the parking lot. Next time, Lila teased, raising an eyebrow. Confident, aren't we? Hopeful, Derick corrected, smiling. She grinned. Dinner sounds great. Saturday night, Derick decided to cook. He had this vision, romantic, domestic, like something out of a movie. Candles, music, perfectly plated pasta. He spent the afternoon cleaning, shopping, and Googling easy, impressive dinners. He settled on chicken parmesan because the internet promised it was foolproof. The internet lied. By the time Lila arrived, the kitchen looked like a crime scene. Flour dusted the counters like snow. A pot of sauce bubbled ominously, splattering red across the stove. The chicken was questionable. Derick had followed the recipe, but somewhere between lightly bread and golden brown, things had gone rogue. Wow, Lila said, stepping inside and surveying the chaos. Did you fight the chicken? Derick groaned. It was supposed to be elegant. It's definitely something, she said, biting back a laugh. The smoke alarm chose that moment to go off, shrieking like a banshee. Derick scrambled for a dish towel, waving it wildly until the alarm fell silent. Lila was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. This is the best date ever. Derick stared at her. You're enjoying this? Are you kidding? She said, grinning. This is real. Way better than some pretentious dinner where we pretend to know what reduction sauce means. He chuckled, relief washing over him. So, pizza? Pizza, she agreed. They ended up on the couch with a large pepperoni, 2 glasses of wine, and a playlist of old songs that made them laugh. At some point, Lila kicked off her shoes and pulled him into a ridiculous dance in the middle of the living room. Derick hadn't danced in years, but with her, it felt easy, like breathing. When the song ended, they collapsed onto the couch, breathless and grinning. Lila looked at him, her eyes warm and bright. You know, she said softly, you're kind of great. Derick swallowed hard. You don't know me that well. Maybe not, she said, but I know enough. And then she kissed him, light, lingering, like a promise. Chapter 6. The Kids' Weekend Twist. Derick had planned the weekend down to the minute. Pick up Emma and Liam at 5. Pizza for dinner. Movie night, animated because Liam had declared all real people movies boring. Saturday morning pancakes, then the park. Simple, predictable, safe. What he hadn't planned for was Lila. She texted him Friday night. Lila, hey, milk guy, hiking tomorrow? Or are you still traumatized by poultry? Derick, tempting. But I've got the kids this weekend. Lila, even better. Bring them. Fresh air, sunshine, and I promise 0 chicken casualties. Derick stared at the message, torn. He'd kept his world separate. Dad world and maybe romance world. Mixing them felt dangerous. What if the kids didn't like her? What if Marissa found out and turned it into a custody battlefield? What if Lila realized his life was more complicated than she bargained for? But then Emma's voice echoed in his head from last weekend. Dad, you need more friends. And Liam's, you should marry someone who likes dinosaurs. He smiled despite himself. Derick, park at 10? Lila, deal. I'll bring snacks. Saturday morning was chaos in stereo. Emma couldn't find her hoodie. Liam insisted on bringing his entire dinosaur collection for emergencies. Derick wrangled them into the car, feeling like a man negotiating with tiny terrorists. The park was buzzing with families, joggers, and dogs that looked more stylish than Derick. He spotted Lila near the fountain, wearing jeans and a striped tee, her hair pulled into a ponytail. She waved, and his stomach did that ridiculous flip again. Kids, Derick said, summoning his best dad voice. This is my friend Lila. Emma eyed her like a customs officer inspecting contraband. Liam, on the other hand, marched forward and announced, "Do you like dinosaurs?" Lila crouched to his level, eyes wide. "Are you kidding? Dinosaurs are awesome. Which one's your favorite?" "Velociraptor," Liam said, puffing up like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. "Excellent choice," Lila said solemnly. "Fast, smart, and terrifying. Kind of like me when someone eats the last cookie." Liam grinned, instantly sold. Emma was harder to crack, until Lila pulled a bag of snacks from her tote. "Anyone like gummy bears?" she asked casually. Emma's eyes lit up. "The red ones. All yours," Lila said, handing her the bag like a peace treaty. Derick watched, equal parts relieved and stunned. Lila wasn't just good with kids. She was natural. No forced cheer, no awkward small talk. Just easy, genuine connection. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't expected how much it would matter. They walked the trail, Liam chattering about dinosaurs while Emma quizzed Lila on her favorite books. Derick trailed behind, listening, smiling, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind, but the quiet kind that sneaks up on you when you're not looking. At the playground, Liam bolted for the slide. Emma followed, her laughter ringing out like bells. Derick sat on a bench, and Lila joined him, handing him a water bottle. "They're great," she said softly. "They're my whole world," Derick replied, watching Liam attempt to climb the slide backward. "I can tell," Lila said, and her voice held no judgment, just warmth. Derick hesitated, then said, "I wasn't sure about today. Because of me?" she asked, tilting her head. "Because," he exhaled, "this is complicated. My life is complicated." Lila smiled, not flinching. "Derick, everyone's life is complicated. Some people just hide it better." He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him shifted. Maybe he didn't have to hide. Maybe he didn't have to wait until the kids were grown and the baggage was gone. Maybe, just maybe, love wasn't about perfect timing. It was about showing up anyway. The afternoon ended with ice cream, sticky fingers, and Liam declaring Lila, cooler than Dad. Emma didn't say much, but when they hugged goodbye, she whispered, "She's nice." Derick drove home with the kids chattering in the backseat and a smile tugging at his mouth. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a locked door. It felt like someone had cracked it open and was holding out a hand. Chapter 7. The X Factor. Sunday evenings always felt like a countdown clock ticking in Derick's head. He hated drop-off day, the quiet drive back, the hollow apartment waiting for him. But this time, the weight was heavier, because this time, Lila was part of the equation. The kids had loved the park. They'd laughed, played, and eaten enough gummy bears to fuel a small army. Emma had even smiled at Lila. A real smile, not the polite one she used when meeting adults she didn't trust yet. Liam had declared her cooler than Dad, which stung a little but also warmed him in ways he couldn't explain. Now, as Derick pulled into Marissa's driveway, he felt a knot tighten in his chest. He hadn't told Marissa about Lila. He hadn't planned to, not yet. But life had a way of laughing at plans. Emma and Liam tumbled out of the car, backpacks bouncing. Derick followed, carrying Liam's dinosaur tote like a man hauling contraband. Marissa opened the door, her expression neutral, the way it always was during handoffs. "Hey," she said. "Traffic okay?" "Fine," Derick replied, forcing a smile. "They had a good weekend." "That's good," Marissa said, her gaze flicking to the car and freezing. Derick turned, and his stomach dropped. Lila was standing by her car at the curb, waving goodbye to the kids. She'd followed them from the park to make sure Liam didn't leave his emergency dinosaur behind. Derick hadn't thought twice about it until now. Marissa's eyes narrowed, sharp as glass. "Who's that?" Derick swallowed hard. "A friend." "A friend?" she repeated, her tone flat enough to iron clothes. "Funny. You never mentioned her." "It's new," Derick said carefully. "She's great with the kids." Marissa's jaw tightened. "Derick," we agreed. "No introducing them to people unless it's serious." "It wasn't planned," he said quickly. "We ran into her at the park. That's all." Marissa crossed her arms, her voice low. "You need to think about what's best for them." "I do," Derick said, heat rising in his chest. "Every second of every day." Emma and Liam hovered in the doorway, sensing the tension like little barometers. Derick forced a smile for them, crouching to hug them tight. "Love you guys," he said softly. "See you in 2 weeks." Emma hugged back, whispering, "It's okay, Dad." Liam just grinned, oblivious, and ran inside. Marissa didn't say goodbye. She closed the door with a click that sounded like judgment. The drive home was a storm in Derick's head. Guilt, anger, fear. He hated conflict, hated the idea that he'd done something wrong. But had he? Lila wasn't a stranger. She wasn't a fling. She was something that mattered. And the kids had liked her. That had to count for something. His phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Lila. "Lila, everything okay?" You looked tense. Derick stared at the screen, fingers hovering. He could lie, say it was nothing. But he was tired of lies. Tired of pretending his life was simple when it wasn't. "Derick, Marissa saw you. She wasn't thrilled. The dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Lila, want to talk about it? Derick exhaled, the knot in his chest loosening just a little. Derick, yeah, I think I need to. They met at the same cafe as before, the one with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. Lila was already there, sipping a latte, her expression calm but curious. Okay, she said as he slid into the seat. Tell me everything. Derick did, about Marissa's reaction, about the unspoken rules of post-divorce parenting, about the fear that he was screwing up the one thing that mattered most. I don't want to make things harder for them, he finished, his voice low. Or for you. Lila reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. Derick, you're not making things harder. You're trying to live. That's not wrong. He looked at her, searching for doubt, for hesitation. There was none. I like you, she said simply, and I like your kids. If this is complicated, we'll figure it out. Her words settled in his chest like a warm stone, solid, grounding. For the first time since the driveway, he felt like maybe he wasn't drowning. They talked for an hour, not just about Marissa but about everything. Hopes, fears, the messy reality of blending lives. When they finally stood to leave, Lila squeezed his hand. You're a good dad, she said softly. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Derick swallowed hard, his throat tight. Thank you. As he walked to his car, he realized something. He wasn't just hopeful anymore. He was determined. Chapter 8. The vulnerability test. Derick had never been good at talking about feelings. He could discuss mortgage rates, custody schedules, and the best way to unclog a sink without breaking a sweat. But feelings? Feelings were messy. Feelings were dangerous. Feelings were what had left him standing in an empty apartment 2 years ago, wondering how love could vanish like smoke. And yet, here he was, sitting across from Lila at a quiet wine bar, trying to find words for the storm inside him. She'd picked the place. Soft lighting, low music, shelves lined with bottles that looked like they belonged in a museum. It was intimate without being pretentious. Perfect for a conversation he'd been avoiding. Lila swirled her glass, watching him with those steady hazel eyes. You've been quiet tonight, she said gently. Everything okay? Derick hesitated, his throat tight. He could deflect, make a joke, talk about work or the kids or the weather. But something in her gaze, open, patient, unafraid, made him want to try. I'm not great at this, he admitted, his voice low. Talking. About stuff. Stuff? She repeated, smiling softly. That's a big category. He huffed a laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. I mean, feelings. Life. The messy parts. Messy is my specialty, she said, leaning in. Try me. Derick stared at his glass, watching the wine catch the light. When Marissa and I split, I thought I'd be okay. I told myself I'd focus on the kids, on work, on surviving. And I did. But, he paused, searching for words that didn't sound like weakness. But it broke something, he said finally. Not just the marriage. Me. I used to believe love was enough. That if you cared enough, fought hard enough, you could hold things together. Turns out you can't. Turns out, you can love someone with everything you have and still end up optional. The word hung between them like smoke. Optional. The thing that had haunted him since the day the judge signed the papers. Lila's expression softened, her fingers brushing his across the table. Derick, I see my kids 4 days a month, he said, his voice rough. 4. And I make those days count. But when they leave, it's like someone turned off the lights. And I hate that. I hate feeling like half a dad. Half a person. He swallowed hard, forcing the lump in his throat down. So yeah, I'm scared. Scared of screwing up. Scared of letting someone in and watching it fall apart again. Silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. It was gentle. Lila didn't rush to fill it. She just held his gaze, her thumb tracing slow circles against his hand. Thank you, she said softly, for telling me. Derick blinked. You're not running? Running. She smiled faintly. Derick, if I wanted easy, I wouldn't be here. Life's messy. People are messy. But you, she squeezed his hand. You care. You show up. That matters more than perfect. Something cracked open inside him then, not in a painful way, but in the way a locked door gives under pressure. He exhaled, the weight in his chest easing for the first time in years. I like you, he said quietly. More than I expected. More than I planned. Lila's smile widened, warm and sure. Good. Because I like you too. And then she kissed him. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't tentative. It was slow, deep, and steady. The kind of kiss that feels like an answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. Derick felt his heart stumble, then find its rhythm again, stronger than before. When they pulled back, Lila rested her forehead against his. See? She whispered. Messy isn't so bad. Derick laughed softly, his hands still cradling hers. Not bad at all. Later, as he drove home under a sky scattered with stars, Derick felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope, not fear. Peace. Chapter 9. Comedy of Errors. Derick had learned one thing from his last culinary disaster. Never trust the internet when it says, easy recipe. But tonight, he was determined to redeem himself. Lila was coming over for dinner. Just the two of them, no kids, no distractions. He wanted it to be special, romantic, memorable for the right reasons. He'd spent the afternoon cleaning like a man possessed. Floors vacuumed, counters gleaming, candles strategically placed to suggest effortless charm. He even bought fresh flowers, which now sat in a vase on the table like smug little witnesses. The menu? Homemade lasagna. Because how hard could layering pasta and cheese be? Turns out very hard. The trouble started with the noodles. The box said boil for 8 minutes. Derick boiled them for 10, because extra soft sounded better than crunchy. Except now they were limp, torn, and clinging to each other like codependent roommates. Then came the sauce. He'd followed the recipe, mostly. Except he doubled the garlic because garlic is good. And now the kitchen smelled like an Italian vampire slayer convention. The ricotta mixture was fine, until he realized he'd forgotten the egg. He added it late, which turned the texture into something resembling spackle. By the time Lila knocked on the door, Derick was sweating like he'd run a marathon. The oven timer was shrieking. The smoke alarm was warming up for its solo, and the lasagna looked like a crime scene. He yanked open the door, trying to look casual. "Hey!" Lila stepped in, her smile bright, until she sniffed the air. "Wow, smells intense." "Garlic?" Derick said. Waving a hand like that explained everything. "Lots of garlic." She grinned, slipping off her jacket. "Good thing I'm not a vampire." The smoke alarm chose that moment to go off, wailing like a banshee. Derick cursed under his breath, grabbed a dish towel, and flailed at the ceiling until the alarm surrendered. Lila was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. "You weren't kidding about the Dad Olympics. This is the freestyle event, right?" Derick groaned, running a hand through his hair. "It was supposed to be romantic." "It is," she said, still grinning. "In a sitcom kind of way." He stared at the lasagna, which had collapsed into a molten heap of noodles and cheese. "Pizza. Pizza," she agreed, eyes dancing. 20 minutes later, they were on the couch with a large pepperoni, 2 glasses of wine, and a playlist of old songs that made them laugh. The candles flickered, casting soft light over the room, and the tension melted like butter on hot bread. "This is better," Lila said, biting into a slice. "No pressure. No smoke alarms." "True," Derick said, relaxing for the first time all evening. "Though I think I've permanently lost my lasagna confidence." "Confidence is overrated," she said, nudging his knee with hers. "Effort counts." He smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. "You're easy to please." "Not easy," she corrected, her tone playful. "Just appreciative." They talked, laughed, and shared stories about childhood mishaps, embarrassing moments, and the time Lila accidentally wore 2 different shoes to a client meeting. Derick found himself leaning closer, drawn by the sound of her laughter, the spark in her eyes. When the playlist shifted to a slow song, Lila stood and held out her hand. "Dance with me." Derick blinked. Here, she said, smiling. "Unless you're afraid of tripping over the coffee table." He chuckled, taking her hand. "Fair warning, I'm terrible at this." "Perfect," she said, pulling him close. "So am I." They swayed in the small space, her head resting against his chest, his hands settling at her waist. The world outside faded, the bills, the custody schedule, the weight of everything. For a few minutes, there was only this, her warmth, her laughter, the quiet rhythm of the music. When the song ended, Lila looked up, her eyes soft and bright. "You know," she whispered, "you're kind of wonderful." Derick swallowed hard, his heart stumbling. "You don't know me that well." "Maybe not," she said, "but I know enough." And then she kissed him, slow, deep, and certain. The kind of kiss that makes you believe in second chances. Later, as they curled up on the couch, Derick thought about how messy the night had been, how nothing had gone according to plan. And yet, somehow, it was perfect. Because maybe love wasn't about perfect plans. Maybe it was about showing up anyway. Chapter 10. The big question. Derick had never been good at quiet mornings. When the kids were with him, mornings were chaos. Pancakes flipping, cartoons blaring, Liam arguing about why socks were optional. But now, the apartment was still. Too still. He sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee, staring at the sunlight pooling across the floor like it had secrets. He should have felt good. Last night with Lila had been incredible. Not because of the kiss, though God, that kiss, but because of everything else. The laughter, the dancing, the way she looked at him like he wasn't broken, like he wasn't just a man counting weekends. And yet, the question gnawed at him. Am I ready for this? He wanted to be. He wanted to believe he could have something real again. But then he thought about Emma and Liam. Their faces, their voices, the way they still needed him to be steady even when he felt like a cracked foundation. Could he balance both? Could he let someone in without tipping the scales? His phone buzzed, pulling him out of the spiral. A text from Emma. "Emma, Dad, do you like Lila?" Derick blinked, heart thudding. He hadn't told them anything. He hadn't planned to, not yet. But kids had radar for these things. He typed back slowly. "Derick, why do you ask?" "Emma, Liam says you smiled weird yesterday. Derick. Weird? Emma. Like happy weird. Derick stared at the screen, a laugh escaping despite his nerves. Happy weird. That sounded about right. Before he could reply, another text popped up, from Liam this time. Liam. Is Lila gonna marry you? Derick choked on his coffee. He typed back, Derick, whoa buddy, that's fast. Liam. She likes dinosaurs. That's important. Derick set the phone down, shaking his head, grinning despite himself. Leave it to his kids to cut through the noise and land on the heart of it. Did he like Lila? Yes. More than he'd expected. More than he'd planned. Was he ready for marriage? God, no. But maybe readiness wasn't the point. Maybe the point was choosing even when it scared you. That evening, Lila came over with takeout and a smile that made the apartment feel less empty. They ate on the couch, laughing about her cat's latest rebellion and Derick's failed lasagna redemption arc. But underneath the laughter, the question hummed like a low note. What are we doing? Where is this going? After dinner, when the plates were pushed aside and the candles burned low, Derick took a breath. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice rough. Lila tilted her head, curious. Okay. Yes. He gestured between them, searching for words that didn't sound like a confession. It matters to me, more than I thought it would. But I need you to know. I'm not simple. My life isn't simple. Her smile was soft, steady. Derick, I never thought you were simple. I mean, he exhaled. The kids come first. Always. And sometimes that means plans change or weekends get messy, or I disappear into dad mode. If that's too much, stop, she said gently, reaching for his hand. I knew what I was signing up for, and I'm not here for perfect. I'm here for real. Her words settled in his chest like a warm stone, solid, grounding. He felt the knot loosen, the fear ebb just enough to let hope Indiana. Okay, he whispered. Okay, she echoed, smiling. Now, tell me, did Liam really ask if I'm gonna marry you? Derick laughed, shaking his head. He did. Said you like dinosaurs, so you're qualified. Lila grinned. Smart kid. Too smart, Derick said, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Later, as they curled up together on the couch, Derick realized something. Maybe readiness wasn't about having all the answers. Maybe it was about choosing anyway. Chapter 11. The setback. Derick had been riding a quiet wave of optimism for weeks. Lila was becoming a part of his life, not just the romantic corners, but the messy, everyday spaces. They'd laughed through burnt lasagna, danced in his living room, and shared conversations that felt like oxygen. For the first time in years, Derick believed he could have something real again. Then came Tuesday. He was dropping off a forgotten math workbook at Marissa's house. Emma had texted in a panic about a quiz, and he didn't think twice about swinging by on his lunch break. He knocked, expecting a quick handoff. Instead, Marissa opened the door, phone in hand, brows drawn tight. Derick, she said, her tone clipped. We need to talk. His stomach sank. About what? About boundaries, she said, stepping aside so he could enter. Emma mentioned Lila again. Derick froze. She did. She likes her, Marissa said, voice sharp. Which is fine, except you didn't tell me you were introducing them. That's not okay. It wasn't planned, Derick said quickly. We ran into her at the park. It just happened. Marissa crossed her arms. You need to think about what's best for them. I do, Derick said, heat rising in his chest. Every second of every day. Then act like it, she snapped. They've been through enough without you parading someone new around. The words hit like a slap. Parading. As if Lila were a prop, not a person who mattered. As if Derick were reckless instead of careful to the point of exhaustion. He clenched his jaw, forcing calm. I'm not parading anyone. Lila's important to me, and the kids like her. Marissa's eyes narrowed. Just remember, custody isn't set in stone. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Derick felt his pulse spike, anger and fear tangling in his chest. He wanted to argue, to shout, to remind her that he'd bent over backward to keep things civil. But Emma's workbook sat on the counter like a silent reminder. This wasn't about winning. It was about the kids. So he swallowed the words, handed over the workbook, and left. By the time he got home, the anger had curdled into something heavier. Doubt. Was Marissa right? Was he moving too fast? Was he risking the fragile balance he'd fought so hard to keep? His phone buzzed. A text from Lila. Lila. Hey, you okay? You sound off. Derick stared at the screen, torn. He could lie, pretend everything was fine. But he was tired of pretending. Derick, Marissa wasn't happy about the kids meeting you. Said I crossed a line. The dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Lila, do you think she's right? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Derick, I don't know. I just don't want to make things harder for them. This time, the dots lingered before her reply came. Lila, maybe we should slow down. The words hit harder than he expected. He stared at them, his chest tight, his fingers frozen above the keyboard. He wanted to argue, To tell her slowing down felt like ripping out something he'd just started to believe in. But what came out was, Derick, if that's what you want. The next few days were a blur of silence. No texts, no calls, just work, laundry, and the hollow ache of an apartment that felt emptier than usual. Derick told himself it was for the best. That space was smart. That he could survive this like he'd survived everything else. But when Friday night rolled around and he found himself staring at the couch where they danced, the truth hit him like a punch. He didn't want to survive this. He wanted to fix it. He called her. The phone rang twice before Lila answered, her voice cautious. Derick, can we talk? He said, his throat tight. Please. A pause. Then, okay. They met at the park, the same one where everything had started. It was quiet now, the playground empty, the air cool with the promise of rain. Lila stood by the fountain, hands in her jacket pockets, her expression unreadable. Derick walked up, heart pounding. Thank you for coming. She nodded. You sounded serious. I am, he said, taking a breath. I don't want to slow down. I don't want to lose this. But I need you to know. I'm scared. Not of you. Of messing this up. Of hurting the kids. Of turning something good into another disaster. Lila's eyes softened, but she didn't speak. He pressed on. I've spent 2 years trying to be steady for them. Trying to prove I'm still dad even when I only get 4 days a month. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself I didn't get to want anything else. That wanting more was selfish. He swallowed hard, his voice rough. Then you showed up. And suddenly I want more. I want you. And that scares the hell out of me. Silence stretched, filled only by the sound of water trickling from the fountain. Then Lila stepped closer, her gaze steady. Derick, she said softly. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for honest. And you just gave me that. He blinked, breath catching. So, she said, smiling faintly. I'm not going anywhere, unless you want me to. Relief crashed over him like a wave. He shook his head, his laugh breaking on a breath. Not a chance. She smiled wider, reaching for his hand. Good. And then he kissed her, under the gray sky, by the fountain where it all began. It wasn't a kiss of uncertainty this time. It was a kiss of choice. As they walked back to their cars, fingers intertwined, Derick felt something settle inside him. Not fear. Not doubt. Resolve. Chapter 12. Optional no more. Derick had never been more nervous about a board game in his life. He'd spent the entire week planning this night, family game night. The first time Lila would officially join Emma and Liam in their sacred weekend ritual. It wasn't just about games. It was about trust. About blending two worlds without breaking either. The apartment was ready. Snacks lined the counter like soldiers. Popcorn, gummy bears, pretzels, and enough juice boxes to hydrate a small army. The living room was cleared for battle. Coffee table pushed aside, floor cushions arranged like a colorful fort. The kids were buzzing with excitement, oblivious to the knot in Derick's stomach. Dad? Liam said, bouncing on the couch. Is Lila bringing more gummy bears? She might, Derick said, adjusting the cushions for the 5th time. But don't ask her the second she walks in. Emma rolled her eyes. He will. I will, Liam confirmed cheerfully. Derick smiled, his heart tugging. They were happy. That mattered more than anything. Still, he couldn't shake the fear that something would go wrong. That Emma would clam up. That Liam would say something brutally honest. That Lila would feel out of place. The knock came at 6 sharp. Derick opened the door to find Lila standing there with a tote bag and a grin. Game night reinforcements, she announced, holding up a box of Uno and a bag of gummy bears like trophies. Liam hooped. She brought them. Emma smirked. Called it. Derick laughed, stepping aside. Come in. Welcome to chaos. The evening started with pizza because some traditions were sacred, and then moved to the living room, where Lila sat cross-legged on a cushion like she'd been doing this for years. Liam immediately launched into a detailed explanation of the rules for Uno, which included several special Liam rules that made no sense but sounded very official. Wait, Lila said, holding up a card. So if I play this, I have to bark like a dinosaur? Roar, Liam corrected solemnly. Barking is for dogs. Got it, Lila said, grinning. Roar like a dinosaur. Easy. Emma giggled, and Derick felt something inside him loosen. A knot he hadn't realized was there. They were laughing. Together. No tension. No awkwardness. Just joy. The games went on for hours. Uno. Then Jenga. Then a chaotic round of charades that ended with Lila acting out Velociraptor. So convincingly that Liam declared her Queen of Dinosaurs. Emma rolled her eyes but smiled, and Derick caught that smile like a lifeline. At one point, as Lila stacked Jenga blocks with surgical precision, Emma leaned against Derick and whispered, She's fun. Derick swallowed hard, his throat tight. Yeah, he said softly. She is. By the time the last gummy bear was eaten and the kids were yawning in a nest of cushions, Derick felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters with one wrong move, but the steady kind that comes when you realize you're not alone anymore. He tucked Liam into bed, kissed Emma goodnight, and returned to the living room, where Lila was gathering cards with a smile. They like you, he said quietly. She looked up, her eyes warm. I like them. Derick crossed the room, his chest full of something too big for words. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. For tonight. For everything. Lila stood, her smile soft. You don't have to thank me, Derick. I'm here because I want to be. He reached for her hand, and she squeezed back, steady and sure. In that moment, with the apartment quiet and the scent of popcorn lingering in the air, Derick knew something with absolute certainty. He wasn't optional anymore. He was chosen. Chapter 13. Optional no more. The school gym smelled like popcorn and floor polish, the universal scent of elementary school events. Derick stood near the bleachers, scanning the crowd for Emma and Liam. It was the spring talent show, and Emma was performing a piano piece she'd practiced for weeks. Liam had signed up for interpretive dinosaur dance, which Derick was still trying to process. Parents milled around, chatting, clutching programs. Derick adjusted his jacket, feeling that familiar tug of nerves. Not because of the kids, they'd be great, but because tonight was different. Tonight, Lila was here. She arrived just as the lights dimmed, slipping through the crowd with that easy smile that made the room feel less crowded. She wore jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. When she reached him, Derick felt his chest loosen like a knot coming undone. Made it, she whispered, sliding into the seat beside him. Did I miss the dinosaurs? Not yet, Derick murmured, grinning. Brace yourself. The show began, singing acts, magic tricks, a surprisingly intense poetry reading. Then Emma walked on stage, her pink headband catching the light. Derick's heart swelled as her fingers touched the keys, the melody filling the gym like sunlight. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Emma glanced toward the crowd, and when her eyes found Derick and Lila, she smiled. A real smile, the kind that said everything was okay. Next came Liam, bounding onto the stage in a paper dinosaur mask. The music kicked in, something vaguely jungle-themed, and Liam launched into a series of stomps, spins, and roars that defied choreography but radiated pure joy. The audience laughed and clapped, and Derick laughed too, tears stinging his eyes because this was his son, wild, fearless, alive. When Liam finished with a dramatic extinction pose, the crowd erupted. He bowed, mask askew, and sprinted off stage like a conquering hero. After the show, the kids barreled into Derick's arms, chattering over each other. Did you see me, Dad? Liam yelled. I was a T-Rex. You were amazing, Derick said, hugging him tight. Emma grinned. And I didn't mess up once. You were perfect, Derick said, kissing her hair. Then Liam spotted Lila and froze. You came. I wouldn't miss a dinosaur dance, Lila said solemnly. It was historic. Liam beamed, and Emma smiled too, shy but warm. Derick watched them, his heart full to bursting. This wasn't just a moment. It was a picture of something bigger, something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Family. Not the kind he'd imagined years ago, but the kind that grows in unexpected places. Messy, imperfect, real. Later, as they walked to the parking lot under a sky streaked with stars, Lila slipped her hand into his. The kids ran ahead, their laughter echoing like music. You okay? She asked softly. Derick looked at her, at the woman who'd walked into his life with gummy bears and a smile and somehow turned everything around. Yeah, he said, his voice steady. Better than okay. She squeezed his hand, and he felt it, the truth settling deep, solid and sure. For the first time in a long time, Derick wasn't optional. He was chosen.